The results of an 85-year Harvard study of adult development show that the quality of our relationships are one of the strongest predictors of long-term health and happiness. And with over 100,000 divorces across England and Wales in 2023, it's no surprise that acute stressors such as conflict in the home or increased caring responsibilities can massively affect well-being and performance at work. Despite this, concepts like relationship health and social fitness rarely get the same attention or investment that organizations give to physical health and mental well-being. So what does good workplace support look like during a major life event like separation? And how important is it for organizations to treat relationship health as part of employee well-being rather than a private issue?
If our relationships at home are not good or breaking down, we are going to take that into work. And so that might look like we're less connected with our colleagues. We might be more stressed, we might be less resilient, we might not be able to take on as much of a workload as we have. So we're trying to get in there early to be able to do that work, to build those foundations and see relationships as being a kind of protective factor to whatever it is you've got going on in your life, because you need it. You need good quality relationship when you're exhausted and when you're stressed and when you're worried about something. That will buffer you and that will keep you protected. And I think that's the same in the workplace. If your work relationships are good and good quality, again, they provide that buffer. So engage in them, don't just let them happen.
To explore these questions, I'm joined by Verity Glasgow, Chief Executive of OnePlusOne, which for more than 50 years has been helping people to understand relationships, navigate change, and to develop the social fitness skills that support well-being at work and at home. Verity, thank you so much for joining the Wellbeing Tour podcast. It's great to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Really good. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so really excited to get into this conversation about the importance of relationship health, social fitness, and what leaders miss. I guess before we get into that, I'd like to dive a bit more into your kind of personal story. You've spent 12 years leading a national charity, shaping relational capability programs and influencing policy. So again, just thinking about your personal story, what first drew you to this field and what motivates you in the work that you do now as CEO of OnePlusOne?
It's in relationships I just find completely fascinating. Relationships happen to all of us, whether we're with a partner or a parent or, teacher, whatever, we have relationships, right? And what drew me to this was really that kind of being able to do something to help yourself. So I've always been really kind of motivated by the fact that we can do things to help ourselves. So we can improve our physical health, we can improve our mental health. And I think maybe relationships have been a space where we thought, we have to go and see someone about that. We need to see a counselor or get some external input. But actually, it's the same with relationships. We can do something to help our relationships and develop our skills. So really that kind of nature of helping people help themselves and put the power of their own kind of self-improvement in their hands, that's something that's kind of always motivated me and what's brought me into this space.
So you speak about self-improvement, you speak about motivation. Just going back over the years, would you say that there's been a moment in your story so far, in your personal journey, that's kind of really shaped how you think about relationship support in terms of the motivation to kind of be in this space?
Yeah, actually, definitely. It was when I first started OnePlusOne. So relationships, I think, have always been in the back of my mind as something that is really fascinating and something I would want to do more on.
Sure.
But when I joined OnePlusOne and I really got into the kind of relationship science aspect. And so what's brilliant about OnePlusOne is all of the evidence and the research that has been done for, over 50 years. And so I kind of really dug into that and thought, okay, what can I find out about this? And when I was doing that, at the same time, I don't really think I realized how lucky I was at the time. I got to meet the director of the Harvard study called George Vaillant at the time. So he's the predecessor to the person who's now running the study.
Sure.
And he was over here to talk at a OnePlusOne event, right? And I thought, this all of this research has been done. I got to talk to this guy who's been running this study, the longest adult development study, all of that. And we had a really interesting conversation. Obviously, he led our seminar. But what I found really interesting was what it boiled down to. And this was over 10 years ago.
Right.
And we asked him really what the findings of the study at that time boiled down to. And he said, it's all about your relationships. It's all about your social connections and your relationships. And that really, the penny dropped for me there was that the evidence coming out of this study then and the research that OnePlusOne had been doing for kind of at that point, 40 years was all pointing towards we can do something ourselves to improve our relationships. And in turn, that improves our health and well-being, and it has an impact. And that was a real kind of turning point for me and a real kind of realization where I thought, relationships are really powerful.
Sure.
And we can do something about this.
Sure. So a bit of synchronicity there. Then you were kind of, working in the space anyway with OnePlusOne. But then once you met George Valence, it was like, actually, if you were ever in doubt that you were in the right space, talking to this guy, meeting this guy, definitely said, no, this is where I need to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for anybody that is, let's say, new to OnePlusOne, how would you describe the charity's mission and the work that you do today?
I would describe, so we are focused on relational capability for all, which to the layperson, which is actually me as well, is just helping people to get on better.
Right.
So that is why we exist. We exist to help people to build their relational capability skills, which is basically a bunch of skills which make you really good at communicating with people and relating to people. And that might be empathizing. It might be being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, really good listening. So a lot of skills, but really that's why we exist, to help people to get on better and improve their relationships.
You've trained over 12,000 practitioners since 2021 alone. And as I understand it, your online resources have reached tens of thousands of parents and families. When you see the scale of that reach from the work that you've been doing historically and recently, what does that tell you about the need for this kind of relational support?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people since 2021. And as you say, more before that. I think need in early intervention, because of course we sit in this early intervention space. So we're talking about how we can help people early in their relationships before the breakdown. And, when it comes to relationship breakdown, it might be sort of what we would recognize as counseling, for example. So when looking at the need, it's quite challenging in early intervention because people don't really know they need relationship support at that stage. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So you kind of you're not sitting there thinking, oh, I'm arguing loads with my partner, I really better do something about this. You tend to just get on with life, carry on with your arguments or the relationships that aren't really quite satisfactory, but life carries on, and you're not really realizing the impact that is having on you, is having on your health, is having on your partner possibly, and your children if you have children, etc., or your work, having on your work as well. So the need is there. Obviously, we've trained lots of people, we've reached loads of parents, but actually it's a much bigger thing, because what we need to do is increase people's awareness so that they're aware that this is needed, and look at relationship support, improving relationship quality as being a kind of public health message.
Yeah, and that's definitely an angle I'd like to lean into a bit later on, as well as the impact on, when your relationships aren't healthy at home, let's say, the impact that has at work. It reminds me, you spoke about, kind of not being aware and of the effect that's having on different aspects of your life, this accruing of emotional stress at home. It reminds me of, there's a film, it's called The Roses, Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yes, yeah.
And you seen it?
I was about to say I haven't seen it, but I
highly
want
recommend
to see it.
Yeah, highly recommend it. It's really, really entertaining. And there's this one point where they're going through it, right? And he kind of turns to his partner and says, "Why don't we just have a 3 hour circular argument that goes nowhere?"
Yeah.
And it was just so relatable for me, and I'm sure a lot of people watching. Yeah, but also further to that, you talk about people just not being aware and kind of just yeah, kind of almost being worn down over time because of poor relationship health. It's almost like the analogy, I'm sure you've heard it, about the frog or the toad, I forget which one, in the amphibian in in the pot of water, right? And if you were to Oh, right, okay. Well, firstly, I'm going to say no amphibians were hurt in the making of this production. But basically, if you were to toss a toad into a pot of boiling water, it jumps out. If you put the toad in a pot of normal room temperature water, it will sit there. You turn the temperature up over time, and it doesn't notice any difference. It boils.
Okay, yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. So that's what it reminds me of, just as a kind of a parallel analogy. Let's say.
Yeah. No, I think it's really important. Like as you're saying, it just runs through our lives, and something that, like you say, if you're turning the temperature up on the arguments, or if that's happening more, you're kind of desensitized to it, possibly.
Become habitualized to the stress of it.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. And it's not, and that's why I think, just going back to the need, we know that good quality relationships, or the quality of your relationships, are on a par with, for example, smoking, in terms of your life expectancy and all of that. So we have the evidence to be able to really point to and say, this is about improving your health. Your relationships will improve your health.
Got you. And you mentioned smoking there as well. So evidently, smoking leads to poor physical fitness.
Yes.
You talk a lot about social fitness. So what does social fitness mean, and why would you say that's a useful way to talk about relationship skills?
Yes, so social fitness is a phrase that's been coined by the Harvard study.
Sure.
And it's really, really useful way for us to be able to relate actually our work to why it's important, and kind of why, working on your relationships is important. So it's a very kind of deliberate link to physical fitness. We're all familiar with that. We know that we need to do exercise. It's better for us. It helps us live longer, all of that kind of thing. We need to eat healthily. So stuff we're familiar with. Social fitness is basically saying, work on your relationships. You can't just expect that you get into a relationship and you've kind of probably done a good amount of work, to get on and, connect and all of that kind of thing. You've probably used curiosity. You've probably been patient. You've probably had empathy, and used lots of those skills. But actually, when you then get into a relationship, we can kind of let that all go.
Yes.
And maybe stop going to the gym. I mean, in terms of physical fitness, it's exactly the same. Always stop doing that sort of thing. And also, I think life happens as well. And so things might change in your relationship. You might go through some transitions. There might be some challenges. You might lose your job. You might have children. And all of these factors impact our relationships. And so they are always going to need some kind of attention.
Yes.
Which is ultimately social fitness.
Got you.
And it's not just your relationship with your partner, if you have a partner, it's your relationship with your work colleagues. You spend so much time at work. So we need to be aware that those relationships with colleagues are important, and keeping those healthy are going to impact you. They'll impact your health, they'll impact your productivity, and more importantly, they'll impact you at home.
Got you.
So it's a lot of relationships are impacted ultimately.
Yeah. So social fitness is a familiar way for us to talk about healthy habits that benefit an aspect of our life. In this case, it's our relationship health.
Amazing summary.
Yes.
You should have just answered that question.
Yeah. Did it myself.
That was perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good. Just checking my understanding. Okay. So something that I guess reinforces the idea of social fitness, and as you've mentioned already, it actually comes from the Harvard study. So what was the Harvard study? Well, I know you're aware, but for anybody watching that wasn't or isn't, it's an 85-year Harvard study of adult development. and it shows that the quality of our relationships is the number one or strongest predictor of long-term health and happiness. So the kind of it's been summarized in a book called The Good Life, which I'm enjoying listening to at the moment. Some really interesting tidbits in there. One of them that just springs to mind. It's there's a story about a train journey. Well, it's not a train journey per se. It was an experiment that they used on a train, but effectively it was talking about, I don't know whether the term was effective forecasting or almost projecting about the future. It was basically saying that humans are very bad at kind of forecasting about our experiences, and that is to say that in a lot of situations, in the majority of situations, we will forecast or project what we think an experience is going to be like, an experience, a situation. People are going to be like, and that then informs to a large extent the way that we experience it. It's almost like a presupposition for that experience. And so they, paraphrasing now, but essentially they did an experiment and kind of spoke to a load of people about, hey, if you were on a train journey going from A to B, maybe on a commute, would you think it would be useful to, in terms of making that train journey better, do you think it would be useful to A, talk to a stranger, or B, basically keep yourself to yourself, read a book, etc.? And like 80% plus, something like that, all said no. Actually, they think in terms of making the journey better, it would be better just to kind of keep myself to myself, read a book, don't bother kind of connecting with the person next to you, etc. And so then they kind of follow that up with the second part of the study, where they asked people to intentionally, connect with a stranger, make some kind of conversation, and then it was reversed. Whereas in so much as everybody said no, the train journey was better, or at least it wasn't any worse for connecting with a stranger, despite what they were thinking beforehand.
What I love about the Harvard study is it's managed to continue. I mean, as you say, 85 years. It's almost one of the longest studies, I think, on adult development
Across two generations.
And through that time, people, I think, have stayed connected possibly because of the importance of social connection and those relationships. But that has continued, and their learning from that has developed through the kind of change in society as well. So there's so much depth to it, and there's so much to learn from it, in terms of how we operate at work, what's important to us in life, our children, developing, growing families. But the one really salient point coming out of that is your relationships are everything.
Sure.
And obviously, I think that's great.
So I guess just, leaning a bit more into, relationships, they ebb and they flow. Sometimes they don't work out. And, separation in and of itself is one of the most kind of emotionally and practically challenging life events that people face. So the recent data shows that there were, in 2023, over 100,000 divorces and dissolutions across England and Wales. And, in some ways, the kind of emotive and the emotive nature of divorce, and also the knowledge gap that, we've kind of been talking about when it comes to social fitness or relationship health. A lot of families struggle as a result to kind of navigate conflict, finances, and the rigors of co-parenting. What do you think people misunderstand or often misunderstand when it comes to the experience of parents that are going through a separation?
I think really the biggest misunderstanding is that you're actually starting a new relationship. So kind of reframing it, yes, you are ending that marriage or, relationship, but you're starting a new one, because if you've got children, you need to be in some kind of relationship with that person to be able to co-parent successfully. So when people are separating, getting divorced, a lot of it is about, I just want to end this relationship now. I just want to get a divorce. I just want it to be over. There's probably been a lot leading up to that.
Sure.
And actually that ending can be really protracted. And it's possibly because of the system that we're in, and the difficulty of getting support and the right advice and how to end the relationship and how to get divorced. But that can be protracted. And so it's not a quick ending. It's really, really challenging. It's highly emotional. But also, I think the biggest misunderstanding really is you're starting a new relationship.
Yes. And I guess protracted just mentally as well. I mean, you were both runners, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I know works really well with running in terms of just kind of getting through it, especially if it's a longer distance, is if you know the route and your brain kind of makes
Yes.
it shorter for you because if it's a trail run, for example, you'll
Mm-hmm.
recognize, oh well, after I've done this hill, there's only so long left, or I recognize that tree over there, or this particular bend, or it'll get really rocky over here, and you just kind of break it down into little segments based on that on that journey, and it kind of helps to really reframe or frame expectations, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of push through because you've got a defined endpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like you say, just kind of reframing what we're talking about when we say, "Oh, we're separating." Um, well, actually, yeah, it's the relationship's ending, but you are starting a new one, and so it's reframing what we mean by end, because it's going to feel very long if in your mind you think end is to mean that that person's no longer going to play a role in your life.
Mm-hmm.
No, they're still going to be in your life. There's still going to be some kind of relationship there. It's just going to be very different. It's going to be, like you say, a new relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So that, yeah, I think is a big misunderstanding, not only for the people to reflect on their own situation and the support that they might need, the
Mm-hmm.
skills that they might need to think about, but also, I guess it would also inform the type of support that they would then receive in the workplace. Like if your managers or your colleagues hear the word all separated and they're thinking, oh, well, that means end and the person's going to be out of your life, then
Mm-hmm.
they would potentially be working from a place of maybe being misinformed as well, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, first of all, can I just say I absolutely love that running analogy. It is literally the best.
Sure.
The worst runs are when you're with someone, they're like, oh, don't worry, I'm going to take you on this run. You think, well, where are we going?
Where exactly?
And
Like,
it stresses you out. And
when's it
then
going
you're
to
like,
end?
how
Yeah.
am I going to pace myself? That's such a brilliant analogy. And that is very much actually what people are dealing with, because it's so hard to know what your journey is going to be like, and it's so hard, it's not going to be simple. You're not going, it's only like 7 miles and around a loop that
Yeah, sure.
so first of all, that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
I'm definitely going to be using that.
love that.
um and then picking up on the kind of how you get support, I think that's such an a really important question, because I know it's going to sound really kind of basic, but you know, we have relationships with lots of people. If we're going through a separation, obviously that's the kind of the breakdown of our couple relationship. But when we talk to people at work, or we talk to our friends, or let's just take our friends to start with,
Sure.
it can often hold up a mirror to people, right? And so if we're looking at our society as it's not a brilliant society about talking about when relationships go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about when we get together with people, it's amazing, everything's great, it's wonderful. And then we do talk about when it's completely broken. And you're fine talking about that. I hate the person, they're awful, all that. But that stuff in the middle, which is your day to day, when you've had an argument about something and then that argument's carried on, or, something's happened, we don't talk about that bit in the middle.
Mm.
And so if someone is going through a separation, and in your own life, you've got something going on, which in your relationship is actually you're kind of questioning it, it's quite hard, and someone starts talking to you, it holds up a mirror, right? And so a lot of the feedback that we can get from our friends and relatives and possibly even work colleagues can be loaded with their own stuff,
Yeah.
on their relationships.
Okay, so two things I'm hearing there, because firstly, when you said mirror, I thought, well, actually, yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes, depending on who's in your circle and what you're going through, maybe speaking to friends, which initially might sound like a good idea, actually might not be the most helpful thing to do, because they might just essentially reflect back what you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I think we call it an echo chamber.
Oh yeah.
Right. But then on the flip side of that, which is kind of also maybe what I think you meant as well, was that it can be good to kind of talk to people as well, because through talking to others, actually, because there is so much, let's say, not synergy, but mirroring going on, that it helps people by talking to others, by talking to people close to you, it can help you to reflect more on your own situation and make sense of things. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, I mean, I think I might have met a third thing actually.
Okay, go on then. Yeah.
Not doing very well with my communication.
No,
I
no.
think what I was meaning there is that if you're going through something really difficult,
Sure.
and you're talking to a friend who on the outside actually they've never complained about their relationship. It all seems fine to you, never really talk about the arguments or anything. And you're starting saying, I feel like I need to end this relationship, or I want to leave, or I don't want to be with this person anymore. And the person you're talking to has actually got a lot of that stuff going on at home themselves, but actually they're afraid. Right. They don't want to leave. Okay. So then they might start projecting onto you and saying, oh, no, you don't want to leave that relationship, or giving you, what's going on for them ultimately. And that's what I mean is that we all come with our own emotions. We all come with our own kind of relationship story. Mm-hmm. And I think in the space of separation, which can be really just full of emotion, you'll probably have a bunch of people who don't want you to separate for whatever their own personal reasons are. Maybe it's because it forces them into a difficult personal space and they think, well, maybe I should separate, whatever. They don't want to see this family breaking down, all of that kind of thing. The most important thing is really, really good advice. Really good advice that you can trust. And I think we're kind of in a world of misinformation, aren't we? Whereby, we've got lots of people who become kind of experts on things and share their views on social media and all of that kind of thing. And with separation and divorce, what people really need is good, solid advice. And yes, of course, you can have support from friends and that kind of thing. But actually what they need is that advice to be able to plot that journey, on the run and really know where they're going, rather than kind of being pulled back and thinking, is this the right thing? And I think there's also quite a lot as well in society about how, the impact on the children, of course. And that's, one of the reasons that OnePlusOne exists is to help people to get on better, which then improves the lives of their children as well. And what we know is, if we go back to what we know in terms of the evidence and the quality of relationships, the quality of your relationship, whether you're together in the same household or whether you're co-parenting, that's the critical thing. So that's what it's about. It's not about staying together, because if the quality of that relationship isn't good, then the impact on the children will be negative.
Got you.
And so, if we're thinking about ending a relationship, you start thinking about beginning that new relationship and think about the quality of that co-parenting relationship. Now, I know that is not simple at all, and it sounds, I'm making it sound simple, but that's the ultimate goal there.
Yeah. So be mindful of mirrors and projection, be mindful of echo chambers, and also be mindful of getting advice from trusted sources when it comes to how you manage a transition in a relationship. So I guess that leads me on to, quite nicely onto the next question, which is around, where people get that support. And actually, firstly, before I get into that, what gaps are you kind of currently seeing in the support that's currently available?
So this has been an interesting one for us, actually. So we created Separating Better because we recognized that there was a gap there. And the gap was really around a free at point of access service for people who are separating. So from our kind of understanding is that the support for separating parents is there if you've got enough money to pay for it.
Right.
Or if you're really in a critical situation where you really need to have some kind of input to be able to kind of help you get through that process.
But for the middle ground.
For the middle ground, and for the majority of people who are separating, it's a complete minefield.
And just to be clear, so Separating Better, that's your digital behavior change app for parents navigating separation.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Good. You kind of alluded to already, this in terms of the gaps in support, that actually whether it was, if you've kind of got the money to kind of, duke it out in the courts, that's one thing. Or if you're in a kind of a crisis, then actually you're kind of, okay, there's source of support available. But for a lot of people that are kind of on this middle ground, that's where you found the gap. So, I mean, taking that into account, and I guess on top of that, what else kind of inspired the kind of creation of Separating Better, and what are the problems were you trying to solve?
Yeah, so Separating Better, I think, really has been in the making at OnePlusOne for over 10 years.
Right.
So because of all of the research that we've done and we do, we recognized obviously a long time ago that there was something going on in the space of separation where people were kind of in really protracted separation kind of journeys, and that people were going to court who didn't need to go to court. Ultimately, if children were involved, then children were having to kind of wait in this unknown space for too long, really. And so we have done lots of research over the last, well, longer than 10 years on the separation process and what one of the key difficulties is for people who are separating. And one of those is, and really the critical thing is, being emotionally ready. And that sounds like quite simple, right? Oh, yeah, being emotionally ready. But actually, when you're separating and you've imagined all of the emotions that you've gone through, I mean, we've all gone through breakups, right? So we know what that's like. But when you're separating and maybe you've had children and you've been together for quite a long time, there are so many emotions attached to that, to the decision-making process and all of that and the ending, where, we might be feeling guilty, we might be feeling angry. There are lots of things we might be still holding on to that relationship. There are lots and lots of things that we might be feeling. And if we can't get to the point where we're emotionally ready, then what we've learned through our research is we can't actually really progress through the separation process. Something's always going to hold us back. Something is always going to hold us up. And we're also working in a system as well, in terms of the system here in the UK, where there is a really protracted process because of the lack of support for parents, because of the lack of clear information. And if you haven't got enough money to go and get some really, really good advice, it's actually quite difficult to do, unless you're emotionally ready, unless you're both in the place where you are able to communicate, where you're able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, where you're able to regulate your emotions, and where you're able to see the impact that it's having on your children. And all of those things are ultimately about being in a good space and being emotionally ready, and then you can kind of proceed. So Separating Better was developed to actually be able to see, it's really a kind of test and learn type approach, to see whether we could improve parents' emotional readiness. So that's what we wanted to do. And in doing that, could we ultimately, the long goal, reduce the number of people that were going to court unnecessarily? Now, the second one, I mean, that's like longer term and we need more funding and all of that kind of thing, but that's still our aim, and that's still the kind of theory of change behind why we developed Separating Better. But the first one, which was around, can we improve parents' emotional readiness? We can. We found that through evaluation.
Yeah. And I like that because, again, it kind of turns it turns the arrow inwards. When you kind of explained earlier about, what is social fitness, again, it's just really about what's in your control, in terms of healthy habits that can help you to, manage this aspect of your life in terms of your relationships, protracted court procedures, extended periods of going into the unknown for you and your family. That's, to an extent, can be, situations that are outside of a person's control, but actually being emotionally ready, thinking about, things that you're attached to, or, anger or guilt, and just thinking about how you process those feelings before you communicate. So you can navigate the change in a productive way. Yes, that puts the control firmly back in the hands of the people involved, which is, I think, really important. So give me some food for thought on emotional readiness.
Yeah.
In terms of I guess specifically the features of the app, which of those features have you found have been most useful for parents on both the practical and emotional sides of separation?
Well, I think it's actually bringing together the practical and emotional that we think has really helped parents and helped to engage them. Because with separation, in terms of what we talked about before, you just want to get divorced, right? You just want to get divorced. That's all you want to do. But actually, you need to engage in the emotional journey, in the emotional side of that separation, in order to be able to reach your goal of, achieving your separation. And so bringing the practical and the emotional together means, yes, we can give you this practical advice, we can give you this evidence-based advice, we can help you on that journey, but actually alongside that, we can also help you with the emotional side and help you to recognize what might be going on for you, what might be going on for your ex, the impact on your children. And within Separating Better, we created a digital behavior change intervention.
Right.
So what that is basically a bunch of really well scripted videos that have been developed in collaboration with separating parents, and also with the evidence and what we know in terms of the skills that we're trying to teach people. And we bring that together and we look at classic kind of arguments that happen between separating parents and, you know, during that process of separation.
Sure.
And we run these videos. We use obviously actors and things like that, but we use the videos to help people to see where their behavior might be impacting their children.
Yes.
And then we run them again, going better with a skill that we might be trying to teach people, which is trying to, you know, listen or see something from somebody else's point of view. And when we run the video again, they can see just that slight change. It's not perfect, but the slight change where someone might just be listening or someone might be seeing it from someone else's point of view. And you can start to see the change there in the interaction, and you can see the change in the children. So that's just a kind of very brief, you know, behavior modeling training kind of run through.
Sure.
But we know that parents that used that part of the app improved their emotional readiness. So, yeah.
Okay, so behavioral change as a feature that's kind of really useful for people, and I love the idea of you know, these competency based examples in a video format that you almost do like an A and B test, and you're helping people to consider alternative perspectives based on the scenarios that they're more than likely going to come across, you know, while they're trying to navigate you know, separating. And you know, as you've mentioned quite a few times already, it comes back to this concept of emotional readiness.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've actually developed a measure for emotional readiness. So it's not just that we've kind of come up with a few questions, a quiz to see if people are emotionally ready or not. And that was the whole kind of thing around developing Separating
So it's
Better.
not just a scale of 1 to 10.
Just a scale. Well, there are 10 questions, but very weird. But it comes from, you know, a psychological framework. It comes from a huge amount of research that we've done. And we've actually validated the measure, which means we've tested it with thousands of parents, and we understand, you know, the levels there in terms of being emotionally ready, kind of being in the middle, and being not ready.
Got you. Yeah.
And what we kind of wanted to do with Separating Better was to be able to understand, okay, those people that aren't ready coming in to use the app, what parts of the app are they using that improve their readiness? Because that's really what we want to do in terms of in the future. We want to be able to say, these are the elements of the content that we provide and the skills that we provide to people that improve their emotional readiness, because that is what is going to improve their separation process.
And of course, it's not a one size fits all. You know, there are obviously scenarios that are kind of common to all, you know, separations, but it's not all going to be relevant to everybody all of the time.
Yeah,
so being able to then kind of highlight, signpost, actually, yeah, based on your scenario, this part of the app is going to be what's more than likely useful to you, I think is again really encouraging for in terms of people getting the most out of this app. So just kind of summarizing then in terms of the findings as a whole, what, if anything, kind of stood out or surprised you the most?
I think what surprised me the most is that we had the shortest time to develop and test this, right? And that's because it was funded by government and they wanted a kind of, you know, quick turnaround to see this test and learn, you know, could this work? And as really, you know, a small charity, the fact that we turned this round, we got thousands of people using it, and we were able to evaluate it in such a short period of time. It surprised me that we saw the impact in that time. Because you might think you need longer, you need more people, you need a longer period of time to test it. But even in that short period, we saw that impact, which really makes me think well, I know it anyway, but it kind of ultimately helps us to shine a light on the fact there is a gap. There really is a gap for this kind of evidence-based advice, clear information, helping people to improve their emotional readiness, and helping people to then be able to engage in communication with their ex-partner. There is. So it surprised me that ultimately we were able to achieve that impact in such a short period of time.
Got you. And you speak about seeing an impact. We've spoken a bit now about how we quantify emotional readiness.
Mhm.
I suspect that isn't a phrase necessarily that the parents that use the app would have used, and I'll be interested to understand a bit more. What are you hearing
Mhm.
from the parents that have used the app in terms of how it changed the way that they felt or communicated?
Yeah, I mean these like terms like emotional readiness aren't really very user friendly, are they? But in terms of what people reported in the evaluation, a lot of what they reported was that it made them just not feel alone in the process,
Right.
and that they recognize that there are other people out there experiencing the same issues and the same challenges and all
Hmm.
of that. Other people reported that it was always there when they needed it. So I think that kind of for us really made us realize that the app was a good idea in terms of having it in your pocket, something that you could refer to all the time, or when you needed, in a kind of private moment or in a space when you kind of needed to take that time. So people reported that as well. And I think really it was the the ability to relate to the content that we were showing and in those videos, that actually, yes, we have those arguments, we have those, we come up against those challenges all the time. And what people have fed back in their responses in our interviews is that it's helped them to see things from another point of view, and it's helped them to be able to communicate better with their ex. It's helped them to see things from their children's point of view, and that's all of the things that we kind of hoped we would achieve from it. But in these early days, we're already seeing that.
Okay, so feelings of empowerment,
Mm-hmm.
access to support readily available.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It sounds sounds really empowering.
And I think the kind of self-regulation, which is so important in everything to do with relationships,
Hmm.
but definitely in separation. I mean, it's so hard, isn't it, when you're kind of ending a relationship? So I think, where people were saying that they were able to kind of regulate enough to be able to have those conversations that they knew might kind of push their buttons and trigger them, but that this has helped them to be able to kind of see the bigger picture as
Sure,
well.
interesting.
Mhm.
So, what's next for separating better? How do you see it evolving going forward?
So, number one, it's about trying to continue to have that funding to make sure that we can keep it at free at point of access. Because I think going back to that gap that we talked about, there really is a gap there for people who need really good advice and all of that kind of thing. So that's number one. We need to keep that going. And number two is being able to achieve what I alluded to earlier, which is really helping people to map out their journey and how they can actually achieve emotional readiness. So when they come into the app, we look at where they are on the emotional readiness scale, and then we serve them up the right content to be able to improve their emotional readiness. And that's the next thing we want to be able to test, which is really be able to map that journey for them.
Yeah, that all of that just makes me want to kind of circle back because you mentioned about we've mentioned that the audience that we're trying to address,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the kind of quantifiable metrics in terms of getting people emotionally ready to kind of navigate a separation. You also mentioned one of the goals being that we want to kind of reduce the number of people
Mm-hmm.
kind of going to court unnecessarily. Could you just talk a bit more to what good looks like with that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think really we know that if parents are emotionally ready, then they're more able to engage with out of court solutions.
Mm,
So they can come to an agreement themselves, they can use mediation successfully, so they can use things which require them not to go to court.
got you.
And so that's the key thing. And so if we can work with that section of parents to enable them to be able to use those resources that are there, then they won't end up going unnecessarily to court. And that's really the aim.
Got you. Okay. Emotional readiness for the win.
Yeah, absolutely. I keep thinking, I'm just repeating emotional readiness, but it's right. Like that's it. That's the key. Yeah.
Got you.
And we actually are the only ones that have this measure. So,
Fill your boots, people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So thinking about relationship health and also workplace productivity, acute stress events like divorce, conflict in the home, or increased caring responsibilities, they don't happen in a vacuum. And as we know, they can massively impact well-being and productivity, especially in the workplace. So with that in mind, you've developed some resources, including the 10 behaviors of a relational leader, which includes things like being curious, flexible, empathetic. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on not just what, but how relational leadership looks and works in everyday management. And more specifically, then, what does good support look like during major life events such as a divorce?
Just first of all, relationships in the workplace. Really, really, it's not complicated. Okay. We have relationships at home, we have relationships at work, we have them outside of work with our friends. We spend a lot of time at work. So making sure those relationships are good quality just loops right back to the beginning.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. So we want our relationships at work to be good quality because it means we'll ultimately get on better at work. And I don't mean just get on better as in get on better with people, but we will make more progress as well. We'll be more productive. And if you're thinking as a kind of manager or a senior leader, your teams will be more productive and all of that. So we want our relationships at work to be good. The kind of other factor is that if our relationships at work are good, then we're going to take that home with us, and that's going to improve or ultimately be a good positive interaction at home. You're not bringing that home, that work stress home.
Yes.
Because home and work aren't really two different things, and even more so now with home working and hybrid working and all of that, we're taking a lot of work back home. If our relationships at home are not good or breaking down, we are going to take that into work. And so that might look like we're less connected with our colleagues. We might be more stressed. We might be less resilient. We might not be able to take on as much of a workload as we have. There might be some absence, all of that. So that's going to play out at work. So there's this
two-way.
Yeah, it's two-way, 100%. So if we learn good, so relational leaders, just talking about that, that was just us trying to take, developing really good relationships into work because we know that has a lot of benefits, but it will also benefit relationships at home. And that's kind of why we exist. So we just try to get in everywhere we can to help people improve their relationships wherever they are.
Okay. So two-way kind of bi-directional relationship, helping people to, not bring the negative aspects of work home and vice versa, home to work. So then thinking then just leaning into the practicalities of being a relational leader, I kind of started the question already talking about some of that, which includes being curious, flexible, empathetic. So very specifically then, as a leader then, how do you balance something like, being compassionate with organizational needs?
Yeah, it's really hard. I think that it's got to come from a base or a relational base. Like you have to have created a kind of relational culture, first of all, in your organization. And, that can be hard because we can kind of shy away from talking about relationships, can't we? Because they're personal and
often it's seen as a private issue.
Yeah, seen as a private issue, exactly. And I think you mentioned earlier, some people might kind of say, I'm going through a separation, and that might actually just make people back off completely and think, well, I'm not going to talk to them at all. But actually, we need to have the confidence to have those conversations because that is going to help your colleague, whether it's a colleague or whether it's someone that you're managing, it's going to help them be able to manage what it is they're going through, ultimately just by giving them the space to be able to talk and, possibly the flexibility to take some time off, possibly referring them to a service where they can talk to somebody else. It's really about being open-minded, I think, is really important. So creating a kind of culture of being open-minded, being curious, tuning in. So on a kind of, dyadic basis, so on a couple basis, you get to know yourself, you get to know what stress looks like on you, you get to know what stress looks like on your partner. If you take this to sort of work level, get to know your team. What cues are you looking for? What does stress look like on them? Are they, acting a little bit different? Can you tune in to what that looks like? Can you arrange to have a cup of coffee with them? Ask the questions, check how they're doing. And just having those conversations and opening that up is kind of the beginning, really.
Yeah, I guess that kind of sets up my next question because you mentioned about culture, really. Essentially, there's no kind of, let's say, short-term tactics that are going to make this transition happen. It's about starting from a base, a cultural foundation of making this conversation about relationships, relational health, just embedded in the workplace. A lot of workplaces want to support people better, but don't quite know where to start. And you've kind of alluded to some of it just there, but I'd like to lean into it a little bit more. If, for example, a senior leader asked you, where should we begin? What would you say when it comes to this kind of culture of relationship health in the workplace, social fitness, etc.?
I think I'd probably start by saying reflect on your own relationships.
Oh,
because
powerful. Yeah.
I know
Okay.
it sounds a bit like, but I think if you're going to do something like that really well,
Yes.
you've got to understand yourself well. You've got to be able to do all of that kind of self-reflection. And so if you're going to be able to kind of model good relationships at work, which is what it is, being a relationally capable leader and all of that,
Sure.
you need to kind of think about how your relationships go and how you relate to others and what your kind of skills are like in terms of relating to others. So I think number one would be that you do need to reflect on that yourself. I think also it's about recognizing that we're all human. And so just in the same way as we can sort of like fall off the wagon and have a few takeaways and not go to the gym or not go for a run or whatever, we can also just not be good at relationships at times.
Sure.
No one's perfect, right? So I think in those cases, in modeling that really good kind of those good relational capability skills, you want to say, put your hands up. I've messed up. Recognize where there's been what we call a rupture, but really it's just like, something going badly.
Sure.
Recognize where you've upset somebody. One of your, your emails or communications has made someone, withdraw or bite back or whatever. Just try and recognize where that rupture has been made and then work to repair it. If we just leave these things open and expect people to kind of be warm to us and be able to relate to us and work with us, that's not going to create good long-term relationships. It's not going to create a good relational culture. But if we go to that person and say, I don't think the way I worded that actually came across as I thought it, I meant it to, or actually, and this would be really powerful if you could go this far, you could say, I actually am having some difficult times at home. My son isn't well. Me and my wife or me and my husband or whatever are arguing. It's making me more stressed, and I'm bringing that into work. Let's talk. It's just being really open and transparent. And actually, I think when you show that you're just human and we have those stresses in life, I think it gives us all a bit of it helps with that whole relational culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think definitely. There's a theme there. When I talk more specifically about mental health and how we can get more buy-in from from employees to senior leadership, there's always that thread there of kind of leading by example, and it just being really important or just as important to actually show. You're not just sharing for the sake of it. You're not just being vulnerable for the sake of it. It's about showing how you're working through those vulnerabilities. What changes are you making? How are you reflecting on it? And how are you adjusting your perspective and your approach to your relationships in this case, so that you can be consistent and more relatable, rather than fighting to keep up appearances and keep up this idea that you've got it all under control, because that's a trap. And you mentioned again, just coming back to one of the benefits from separating better, that it kind of decreased feelings of isolation and loneliness. I think that's one of the traps that we can fall into, particularly that when we're stressed, that we feel that everybody outside that knows what's going on in our minds, and we're kind of all alone, and maybe nobody else would understand, or that okay, so it's really messy for us at the moment, and you're looking around and everybody else has got it all sorted out. And that's one of the things that I find for sure is it's a really quick way to make yourself unrelatable as a leader, if you can't kind of show some kind of tactical vulnerability in that sense.
But like you say, it's got to be genuine. I think that's exactly what it is. And I think that you can do that by, if you go back to social fitness, you can do that by practicing. So I see every interaction as an opportunity to practice your skills, an opportunity to engage, to improve how someone else is feeling, but also improves how you're feeling too,
Yes.
But then there's also times I'm actually, I'm an introvert. I actually prefer to, be on my own and not be in large crowds and all that kind of thing. So it takes quite a lot for me to kind of do that. But then I recognize the benefit of that and I recognize how that actually helps me. And so there's a lot about kind of self-knowledge that helps us to be better at relationships as well.
So tell me something. What is one practice that you kind of that you practice yourself that kind of helps you with your own relationship health?
Well, number one, I try just to be really, really human, which is probably a really basic answer. But I think, it's quite hard as well because I'm not just a leader, but I'm supposed to be really good at relationships because that's the work that we do, right? So, I'm kind of always thinking, oh God, I've got to do this really well, but I am human. And there are times when I don't do things really well at work. And there are times when I don't do things really well at home. And so number one, for me, it's about kind of going, it's okay. You are human and you're not always going to be really good at relationships, which is exactly why I and we all need to practice our social fitness and use those interactions that go wrong as a way to learn and use other opportunities to be able to practice those social fitness skills. So be able to practice really tuning in and listening, to be able to practice putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. And also, I think another thing which is quite helpful in the workplace is kind of looking at people that you don't naturally get on with that well, or that you maybe, there might be kind of always coming up against each other and thinking, okay, let me put myself in that person's shoes. Okay, how are they relating to me? What are they seeing in me? And really just thinking about that. And also, I suppose the other thing is, like I said earlier, you've got to be able to see when something's a bit off with someone and then be confident enough to have that discussion with them, because it may well be something about a relationship at home. It might be something about health, or it might be something about a relationship at work, and helping them to be able to talk about it and to be able to kind of, have the skills themselves to be able to move through that, I think is really important. Yeah.
So acceptance, self-reflection, and also the ability or intentionally taking the time to consider other people's perspectives.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the more you can know, I mean, if you're talking about, for example, my relationship at home, the more I know my partner and what stress looks like on him, the better our relationship will be, because I'll be able to spot, oh, he's bringing that work stress home. This is what he means by that. You'll be able to kind of shortcut. So the more you practice your social fitness, or more you practice those skills, the more you can actually shortcut things. I mean, it takes energy, right? And that's why sometimes we just fall off the lorry of relationships, because sometimes we're really tired. And in fact, if both me and my partner are really tired, that is when our arguments will happen, because we don't have the wherewithal to go, I'm trying to see this from his point of view, I need to stay calm, all those things. Sometimes you just can't do it all.
Do you have a bit of a, let's say, safety net in place where you kind of both recognize that you're tired? You say, right, I'm going this way, you go that way, we'll circle back in 2 hours when we've had some space, type thing? Or
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Or if neither of us have even got the capacity to do that, sometimes it just ends up in a big argument.
it happens.
It happens.
Right.
And then you have to use that as an opportunity to learn and to come back together and make sure that you're kind of repairing that. And then it's generally better than it was before. But you have to make time. You really have to make time.
When you think about, relationship health in the UK, the future of relationship health in the UK, what gets you most excited?
What gets me most excited? Well, I think if we can achieve, I think more and more people are talking about relationships now, which is good.
Yes.
I think that, in the same way that mental health got kind of ahead of steam and people felt more able to talk about their own mental health and all of that kind of thing, I do think people are more tuning into relationships being a key part of our health and longevity. So what makes me excited is that there's more discourse around, right? There's more people talking. And I think that as somebody that's kind of leading this charity in terms of research into relationships and what makes them go well and what makes them hard and all of that kind of thing, what makes me really excited about what we're doing is that we're contributing to people's kind of skills, and going back to that very beginning of why I'm kind of interested in that, is that we're enabling people to help themselves. So we're trying to get in there early to be able to do that work, to build those foundations and see relationships as being a kind of protective factor to whatever it is you've got going on in your life, so that you can actually then get on better. Ultimately, you can progress in the way that you want to. And so I feel really excited that we're contributing to that, and that there are, you see the impact that motivates me. I see the impact of people's relationships improving, and then what they can do with that.
And if there was one thing you wish that every parent, leader, or partner understood about relationships that could make life a little bit easier, what would that be?
I think it would be that they literally need to engage with them. That they don't just happen. They're not just happening around us. They need to engage. And so if you take a kind of a parent, a new parent, or people kind of transitioning to parenthood, recognizing that yes, you're having a baby and that's major and you have to keep this human alive, but actually you're starting a new relationship with the baby's other parent. That's a new relationship. It's kind of, your old relationship is still there and there's the roots of it, but this is new. And so start to prepare now, because that will then help to keep the quality of your relationship high, because you need it. You need good quality relationship when you're exhausted and when you're stressed and when you're worried about something. That will buffer you and that will keep you protected. And I think that's the same in the workplace. If your work relationships are good and good quality, again, they provide that buffer. So engage in them, don't just let them happen.
So thinking proactively about relationships at work, at home, wherever you find them, and recognize them as a protective factor for your health. Verity Glasgow, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining the Wellbeing Talk podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
This has been another episode of Wellbeing Talk with myself, Matt Balfour, your guide to more accessible conversations about mental health in the workplace. Be sure to subscribe to the Let's Go Wellbeing YouTube channel, and we'll connect on the next episode.
Social fitness is a really good way. It's a great term to bring it into.
Really?
This is a fire alarm test. No action required.
Now that's got to be like a what's a blooper or outtake or something.
Fire alarm test.
definitely got to use this one. That's amazing.
It's so polite.
Yeah. Oh. Well, that definitely got picked up on the audio.
Yeah, just pick up that last bit if you can remember exactly what we were saying.
Yeah,
Would be great.
Well, when it's over. Yeah.
Yeah.
Attention, please. Attention, please. We are investigating an alarm condition. It may be necessary to evacuate the building. Please listen for further announcements.
Alarm condition.
Fire alarm test now complete.
Oh, good. Amazing.
No.
Fire alarm test now complete.